Hi guys, John Bailey here, gemstone artist and founder of the Faceting Academy. I often say that one of the places that the faceting game is won or lost is at rough evaluation. And I get a lot of questions about rough evaluation, partly because of my heavy emphasis on it. We've got here a piece of sunstone sent by a potential client for cutting. And I'm just going to run through some of the rough evaluation that I'm doing on this piece just to share some of the stuff with you. So you can get an idea about scale. If we throw the calipers on here, we're gross of 18 by something like 32 roughly. And then again, this is gross measurements. This is not the usable material. We're about 13 and a half or something like that. So this is a good size piece of material. And so just right off, one of the first things that we do is we're going to use a kind of a dark background. I'm using this green scrubby pad just for something that's dark and that's not reflective. I don't want look around for what's handy, just something that's flat and dark. So we're not getting too much light being reflected back through the stone. I want to use reflecting light off the stone, not through the stone yet at this point. And one of the things that we see right off, when we tip this piece of Oregon Sunstone around, we see these bright flashes right here inside the stone. See these little fingers, stripe, there's a stripe here. We get a little bit of a flash back here. That's schiller. And we're looking at a faceted stone. We want to be really careful about how much schiller we're going to allow in. This looks like we might have some barred schiller, and we need to clean this junk here off if we're going to look further into potentially faceting this thing. But this might be exciting, barred schiller, or it might be an indication that there's just too much schiller in here and that we're going to kill the stone if we try to build a faceted stone, and maybe we want to look at a carving or something. But so right off, we're going to notice that. We're going to flip it over and look at 180 degrees. Let's look at the back side of this schiller. And we'll notice that the schiller also, we're getting glare when we're trying to see the schiller because the schiller is oriented to this crystal face. And that's pretty typical. So we're going to flip it. Just taking a quick peek. And there's not a lot of flash coming from the schiller here. That might be, this needs to be cleaned off, but that might be a good indicator that there's not an excessive amount. So the first thing we're going to start looking at past that is what parts of this stone are just going to come off. Clearly, we've got a big crack here, runs all the way through. So this entire plane is going to come off the stone. And one of the things I like to do is I like to just mark it. So I'll take a Sharpie and I'm going to mark this seam. And I'm going to trace it pretty much all the way around. Where's it going to come apart? And I'll watch this edge of the seam. So I'm going to go from side to side, and that's going to help me trace. So here's the other edge. You can see the margin right there. So once I've come up this edge and I've come up this edge, then I can connect these two lines because this is a cleavage. So I know it's going to be straight. It's hard to see on this side, easy to see on the other side. So that's one of the reasons we mark it. So now no matter what direction I look at this piece of rough, I know that no matter what I do, this is coming off. That's a cleavage, it's just coming off. So we'll take the dark thing out of the way. And now we're going to throw light. Now we're going to throw light at an angle. And I'm going to bring it down close and reflect it strongly off this piece of white paper. So I can pump light from the back of the stone. And when we start to tip it around, pretty quick we see this line right here. That's a crack, or a cleavage actually. It's parallel to this one. So this cleavage plane, and when you find a cleavage plane and something that has them, look carefully parallel wherever there's a mark that seems to run parallel to that cleavage. Look really closely because there's probably another cleavage there. That's certainly how to look for them. So I know pretty much the location of this. I know it's a cleavage. I might as well mark it. And the closer I look, I'm going to see some more telltale signs. I'm trying to get the angle. I can see it with the eye, but I'm trying to get the cell phone camera to pick it up. So backlight it a little more strongly. There we go. So we got more backlighting. And now you can see the edge of the crack right here. All right. So no matter what you do, that's going to come apart there. It's a cleavage. There's no two ways about it. You're not going to keep that together. You can see part of the mark down here, part of the line. So we're just going to mark the piece of rough. That way we know where the boundaries are going to be that are going to be useful. Just keep it parallel. Okay. When we continue to backlight, use that transmitted light, and look this way, we start to see the edge of a crack right here. And I'm going to adjust the light again to a direction that'll show it better. There we go. So this is the front edge of our crack, the near edge right here. And we can see it running down into the stone. So we'll flip it over and look from the other side. And here's the other end of it. It's a nice straight crack, runs right through the stone. So we're going to treat this the same way. I'm going to mark it on this end of the crack. Mark it on this end of the crack. And flip it over. Find the other end of the crack. And not everything has cracks that runs nice and straight like Sunstone. Sunstone really tends to run, you got these cleavage lines in it, and it'll really tend to make nice, straight cleavages, and you'll get this rhombohedral pattern with it. Okay, so that piece is going to come apart on those lines, and there's nothing you can do about it. You're not going to retain that chunk in there. If you try to cut a piece of Sunstone like that, first of all, it's going to be ugly if it holds together, but probably it's not going to hold together. One of the things we can see is this kind of flaw, and it looks like it's more on this end. You can see it here. And we're doing this without immersion oil. I mean, we would ordinarily, and I will before I'm done, drop this in immersion oil and look at it really close. But that guy, I think, is more on this end. Starting with the first line that we showed before, we can see the nice reflection off of that cleavage plane inside the stone. Matches the Sharpie line that we drew here on the left-hand side. We change our angles around, and we'll just see that same cleavage from the back as well. pretty plain. And when we begin to look at the other one, we're going to flip the stone over and put it on top. You can see down here on the end that our Sharpie line is very close to that cleavage. This is the same one from the other side. With this angle, we can light up that cleavage plane. We're reflecting light off of it, and you can see how it follows where the Sharpie line is. There's our fracture lighting up right there. This looks offset from our Sharpie line. That's because our line is on the end of the crack, and part of what's lighting up here is penetrating into the stone and traveling at an upward angle. So this gives us some rough boundaries just based on these really pretty serious cracks. We've got a stone, probably a useful stone. This rhombohedral shape here, we might turn it this direction and turn it into an oval. Maximize the length like this. Maybe, these are just ideas. So maybe put an oval there. We've got to be cautious about the color zoning because we need to keep the red in the culet. I don't want to make a culet so deep that it drops down into this clear because that's going to kill color. So potentially this size. What is this, a 9 wide? Pretty close to 9 wide. If we did an oval, could do a 12 by 9, somewhere in that neighborhood. That's the length to width we're going to be looking for in designs, if we start selecting designs for that. And we can start to get an idea about what's our weight yield going to be. What's a 9 by 12? We got plenty of depth here, although we need to stop in this color. So we're really limited to seven. So we're not going to be doing any burying with that. 7 wide or 7 deep, 9 wide. That's probably not a burying. That's going to be a standard sort of a cam oval or something in a 12 by 9 kind of length to width. This is my fast and dirty, by the way. What is this? What can we do with this piece of rough? What's going to come off of here? We want to pay attention to this right here. Not that we would want to retain that in depth because it would be clear anyway, but we just want to pay attention to what we know has got to come off. So this other chunk may be an oval, maybe a long pear, maybe something freeformish. Take this divot out here. So in terms of useful material, shape like this, maybe an egg, maybe just a rhombohedral. So rhombus, what have we got there? 7.5. Might have a little more depth there for color than on this other end. I think the color's a little deeper. think we might consider a pair. The rhombus is probably a better yield. And we won't make a commitment on this without cleaning all this off and dropping it in the immersion oil and looking at it closer. This is just the fast and dirty first over with no immersion. So we might wind up with a pair, something like, well, that's 15. Maybe you could cheat a 10. Probably more like a 9.5, maybe a 10. 10 by 15, and that's an LW for a pair. So that's the fast and dirty. Looking at a couple of pieces, drawing lines to track some cleavage planes to make sure that we don't convince ourselves we're going to get way more than we're going to get. And that's just, I was evaluating this thing anyway. I just decided to do the kind of talk I would normally talk to myself. I decided to do it out loud and see if you guys would enjoy it. I hope you find it useful, and look for more on facetingacademy.com.